What's going on, everyone? My name is Jonathan, host here at the Jono Show, and I am so privileged to be joined today by Dr. Myron Golden. Myron, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely my pleasure, John. My pleasure.
All right. Well, I can't wait to get into your story here because you have a fascinating story. You have a book out called From the Trash Man to the Cash Man, right?
Yep.
And
The Cash Man.
As I was doing research into this, I was reading about your story. It's fascinating, right? And I'd love for you to take us through that a little bit. You also are guided by biblical principles as it regards to business and mindset and money and different things like that. And so I'd love to get into that as well. But I want to know, how did you get into coaching? Because you've coached some incredible people. You've made people millions and millions of dollars. You've made a lot of money yourself. You've not had a lot of money. How did this whole story begin?
Yeah, it started when I grew up poor. Okay, I'm the second of 7 brothers.
Okay,
and we grew up poor, hardworking parents. My dad was a plumber. My mom was a beautician, and they did the best they could with what they knew to do. But they taught us to work hard. They taught us to be honest. And I got my first job when I was 14 years old. I made $1.55 an hour picking up trash on the streets in Columbus, Ohio. For my summer job, right? Because I wanted to buy Converse All-Stars. And my mom said, there's no way in the world I'm buying you sneakers that cost that much, right? And so I had to figure out how to make my own money. And what was really fascinating is when I started making my own money, I no longer wanted to spend it on Converse All-Stars. I found other things that were more important to me. And I worked for other people for 20 years. Right. So from the time I was 14 to the time I was 34, when I was 34 years old, I got fired from my last job right before I quit or right after I quit. They happened so close together. I'm not sure which one happened first. And when that job ended, I told my wife, I said, I will never do this again. I'll live in the forest in a tent, but I will never work for anybody again and subject myself to this kind of craziness. So, and I have not had a job since. I've been what I call gainfully unemployed since 1994. So
I love that. I actually had my path to entrepreneurship was very different. I had a ton of different jobs, and I actually growing up felt like entrepreneurship is the worst thing that you could do because it's so risky. You know, I have 2 radically different parents. You know, one, my dad is a total career guy. He's been involved in the same industry and a couple select companies for 40 years. My mom is wildly entrepreneurial. And so I always saw my dad as kind of the breadwinner and the person who brought, the money home. And my mom had all these ideas and my dad was consistent. And so for me growing up, it felt like, you get a job, you go to school, right? Get as good grades as possible, get into the best college you can so that you can graduate and get the best job you can so that you can. Yep. So that was the flow that I was on.
So you can make, quote, good money, whatever that means. And then the company takes care of you when you retire.
100%.
Yeah.
And that narrative is kind of being played out for my dad. Right. But in the process, I realized that I was terrible at school. I realized that
I was not very good at it either. Well, I did really great in school all the way through the 3rd grade.
Okay. Well, and we're gonna have to get into that.
Downhill.
We're gonna have to get into that because you have a PhD. So we're gonna have to figure out that gap right there. But sure. For me, I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I felt like entrepreneurship was the worst thing you could do. And I was I think God really directed my life, but I feel like I also was boxed into it. And then all of a sudden I discovered it and was like, what have I been missing? How have I been?
What new thing is this? Yeah.
So what was it for you that was so terrible about having a job?
Well, I'm allergic to bosses.
Okay.
And I don't have any outfits that match a boss. No, I'm just kidding. I don't like people telling me what to do, to be honest with you. That's one thing that I didn't like about having a job. I didn't like people telling me that I couldn't do something. Like, no, you can't do that. Or telling me when I could go to the bathroom. I just felt like it felt degrading to me, even if they didn't intend it that way. So that was one thing. And I noticed that nobody was willing to pay me the kind of money that I wanted to be paid. And so those 2 things right there impacted my life in a great way. And I already knew somehow in the back of my mind that the story you have to have a job was not true, because when I was about 16 years old, my dad came home one day And that was the day that I heard him say, okay, I'm never going to work for anybody again. I'm like, if you're not going to work for anybody, like, what are you going to do? And then he's a plumber, but he started doing plumbing just for himself, working for real estate developers and contractors and so on and so forth. And he made more money working for himself than he ever made having a job. I was like, oh, you don't have to have a job. So I kind of knew in the back of my mind, you don't have to have a job. And, but I really hated having a job because the pay was always too low and the orders were too many.
Okay. So those people right now who, we're in this crazy time of life. And, I know you've been through multiple cycles of business. So Absolutely. You may have more experience than certainly I do. This is my first kind of big, market crash, although it's not really a market crash as much as it is just like a massive world event that shaped how I.
Right. It's not a market crash yet.
Exactly. And maybe that's a topic for a different podcast. We could totally get into that. But so I want to talk about that shift then from kind of this 9 to 5 mentality. I feel like so many people are in this category that they have a job, but they're just like you are at that point, dissatisfied. They don't like having a boss. How do you, what someone comes to you and says, hey, Myron, I want to quit my job. I'm sick of this. I don't want to do it anymore, but I need that paycheck. I need that money. And maybe even they're young. Maybe they don't have, family, wife, kids, all that other stuff. What's kind of the first thing where's step one?
Well, step one is don't quit your job.
Okay.
That's, believe it or not, step one is don't quit your job because nothing, but start a business while you have your job. Nothing will inspire you to build a business that you love like having a job that you hate. So stay at the job that you hate until the business that you love is making at least as much money as the job you hate. And it's not a bad idea to be making 1.5, 2 times more at the business that you love than you are at the job that you hate, and then walk away. And then as soon as you walk away, put yourself on payroll with a payroll company as a W-2 employee of your own company. You don't just burn through money.
So that's really tactical advice. And I love that. I'm all about like super practical piece of advice. So that's amazing. When you say start your business while you have a job, is this something that you did? Is that a transition?
That is something that I did. Absolutely. So you said I wrote the book From the Trash Man to the Cash Man, right? So while I was driving a trash truck during the day, I would get up at 2:30 in the morning. I'd get dressed. I'd be at work by 4, right? And I eat breakfast, do all that stuff, be at work by 4, check the tire pressure and the hydraulics in the truck, I would drive 4 or 5 trucks to the dump. I was called a shuttle driver. I would go empty the trucks after other people filled them up. And so I would drive 4 or 5 trucks to the dump, and I was done for that day. And then I'd come home and I'd take a nap. I'd get cleaned up, and then I'd go out at night and I would attempt to sell insurance and investments. I was licensed in securities. I was licensed in insurance. And so while I was I was making a living during the day, I was making my fortune at night. And I wasn't making a fortune at night, but I was becoming the person who would eventually be able to make a fortune by going out and having conversations with people. And a lot of people, when I say build a business that you love, and when I say build a business, I'm talking about you actively engaging in conversations with somebody who desires a result that you can produce and have them pay you for it. That's what I mean. Okay, that's what I mean by a business. And you already do it. And if most people stopped and thought about the fact that they've already closed a high ticket deal in their job because they closed somebody on paying them 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, $90,000 a year. Well, if you can close one person on paying you 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 30, 70, 80, $90,000 a year, what if you could get 10 people and close all of them on paying you $20,000 a year? Now you're making $200,000. What if you could get 50 people to pay you $20,000 in a year? Well, now you're making $1 million a year, right? So, and those numbers, like, wow, that's pretty simple math. Well, it is pretty simple math, but most people never do the math. And what they think of when they think of owning a business, they think of actually doing the process that the business does as being the business. But the process that the business does is not the business. That is the job that the business does, right? The job is not the business. The job is just it's the deliverable. And most people get it confused because their whole life they've only had a job. So all they've known was the process. They didn't understand the business, which is why they only got paid a smidgen of what they were selling their time for.
You just talked about time, and I think that's powerful thinking about it like the business versus the actions that are in the business.
Mm-hmm.
But you talked about time, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear any mention of like extracurriculars. The recreational basketball league that you were on, ping pong, random other fun stuff. I didn't hear about TV. I didn't hear about, fun stuff. It seems like you were all in.
Oh, I was all in. Well, you only have so many hours in a day.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm a husband. I'm a father. I've got like either I'm going to figure this out or we're going to be living in this 1-bedroom apartment our whole life. And that ain't happening. Right. And there are too many people who are seeking balance too early in their lives. Balance is not the objective of life. Balance is a season of life. Right. And just like it's never summer and winter at the same time in the same place, the opposite season of balance is focus. And just like it's never winter and summer at the same time in the same place, one person should never be in focus and in balance at the same time. And fortunately for me, I figured this out early. And so in the early days of my life, when I was in my 20s and my 30s, I was intensely focused and had almost no balance. People thought I was obsessed. They only thought I was obsessed though, because I was obsessed. Right. And I was obsessed at breaking out of the bondage of poverty. And so I was so singularly focused. I am going to be rich. And yes, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be wealthy. I'm going to be magnificently wealthy. I'm going to leave an inheritance to my children and my children's children. And money is not going to be something I'm going to have to worry about. And so, or have to wonder about. And I want to be able to go and buy something without having to look at the price first. I don't care what it costs. If I desire to buy it, I want to be able to buy it. And so for me, watching television was not an option. We did not have a television until my children were teenagers, because I was not going to watch somebody live their dream while we were living a nightmare. Right. I don't want to see them. I want to be them. I want somebody watching me on their television. Right. And so that was my mentality when I was in hyper focus mode. Now I'm in kind of, it started out when I first started, I had this much focus and this much balance. Right. Now I've got this much balance and this much focus, because my life doesn't require as much focus now because I have momentum. But a lot of people don't have momentum, and they don't realize to overcome the inertia of being broke and to create some financial momentum, it's going to require intense, enduring focus. And so, no, I wasn't playing basketball. I wasn't playing golf. I wasn't watching television. I was spending as much time as I could with my family, but I was going to make us free. Right. We are going to get free, or we're going to die on our way out of bondage, but we're not going to stay here and get comfortable. So I love that. I love that. I think you hear a lot of people, including members of my family and me at times, who I know saying, I want to be more balanced. I want to invest more in myself, but by that, they don't necessarily mean reading more books. It's like having this good work-life balance, finding something you love to do. There's a kind of a focus on comfort that I feel like is really prevalent. And you mentioned not having a TV in your house until your kids were teenagers. We have, TVs here all the time, right in front of us. And we're constantly scrolling through, pictures and videos of other people's lives. Mm-hmm. And so that's remarkable. You're kind of turned that mindset on your head. You had a focus of creating versus consuming everyone else's life because you wanted that outcome. You didn't want to be in that same place. I love that. That's powerful. Was there a point where, you got married? Did you get married pretty early? I was 25. I guess that's early. It wasn't like I wanted to be married first time I ever saw a girl. I was like, oh yeah, let's go. Right. I mean, and I'm literally like, the first time I ever saw a girl, I was like, wow, what new thing? Because I've got 6 brothers. Right.
Yeah.
So we didn't have girls. We didn't and I've got a lot of boy cousins, a handful of girl cousins. I was like, wow. Yeah, cool. Yeah. So yeah, I got married at 25.
So then was there a moment where, you were married and you were just like, that drove you even harder and even further because, okay. Tell me about that.
Because, so when I was in college, I met this beautiful girl, and I didn't have lots of money. And in fact, I didn't have any money. I didn't have a nice car. All of my clothes came from Goodwill and Vets of the Salvation Army. Like, that's where I did my shopping. But when I met this girl, the day I met her, I told my brother, I went back to my roommate, told my brother, who was my roommate in college. I said, I met the girl today I'm going to marry. And she didn't go back to her room and tell anybody she was going to marry me, but I had a plan. So I had two things. I had 2 things going for me. I could talk pretty good, and I could write poetry to make you hurt yourself. And I remember the first poem that I wrote for this girl was called "What Will It Take." I was 21 years old when I met her, And I wrote this poem called What Will It Take? And it was like 27 stanzas. I just give you a little snippet of it so you can see what I'm talking about. And it went like this, something like this. What will it take to win thine heart, thou fairest of the fair? Will it take a prince of princes or a valiant knight to dare? To win in one so beautiful as you might that require a nobleman, a priest, a king, or someone even higher? What will it take to win the heart of one so kind and fair in youth? Probably take a rich man or handsome of a truth. What will it take to win the heart of one so comely and sublime? Must one be a sovereign ruler or a monarch in his prime? None of these do I possess, and yet I seek to win thine heart, thou queen of elegance, above these valiant men. I'm not a prince of princes, and I've never been a knight, but if I had a chance to win your heart, I think I might. I'm not a nobleman, I'm not a priest or king, but to win your heart, thou fairest, I'd make the bells of heaven ring. Since I don't know what it takes to win your heart so true, please tell me what it takes to win, and that's what I will do. She said, oh, Myron. I said, it's on now, boy.
I was going to say, all right. That was incredible. That is incredible. Okay.
A whole bunch of poems later and a whole bunch of promises later, finally got her to say, I do.
All right.
And then in a very short time, financially, we were in a very bad place because nobody taught me the marriage math. And here's how the marriage math works. If you're doing really, really bad financially, and you're having a hard time taking care of one person, when you get married, it's going to be twice as hard to take care of two people. And that thing hit us hard. I can remember being so poor that we were taking the cushions out of the chair and the couch that we had, took the seats out of the car, looking for enough change to buy one loaf of bread so we could eat peanut butter and jelly. Because we had the peanut butter, had the jelly, but we didn't have any bread, right? I can remember being so poor that when my wife was 8 months pregnant with our first child, I want you to imagine how horrible this felt imagine how horrible this must have felt for me. I remember how horrible it felt. This beautiful girl made her all these promises. She's 8 months pregnant. Baby's due in a month. We don't have any money. We're so poor. Our water and electricity are both disconnected at the same time.
Wow.
I'm like, I got to do something, man. This is like, I hate this. Right. But I didn't understand entrepreneurship. Even at that time, I was kind of an entrepreneur. I'd buy old raggedy cars, fix them up and sell them. But if I didn't sell a car, we didn't have any money. Right. And so interestingly enough, I was like, this woman who stuck with me through all of those difficult times. Oh, yeah. Oh, she's going to have the life. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We're going to do this thing. And so fortunately, like the first business opportunity that I ever looked at, it was a business opportunity meeting for a network marketing company that sold insurance and investments. The first opportunity meeting I ever went to, she went with me. So she bought into the dream right when I bought into the dream. And we were hooked ever since. That was in October of 1985. And we didn't have our first six-figure year until 1999. So it was 14 years. People say, Myron, you're an overnight success. Yep. It was a 14-year night. Right. But after that, it only took us like 3 years, maybe 4, to have our first 7-figure year.
Wow. So you basically, it was kind of one of those trends that start here and then kind of hockey stick in a way. You were doing nothing for so long. And then you that was the economic,
like 1998, we made like $48,000.
Okay.
1999, we did like 112. So like, I learned something. I learned, I had a couple of financial breakthroughs, like mentally, financial literacy breakthroughs. I shouldn't call them financial breakthroughs. They were more financial literacy breakthroughs in January of 1999. And you read my book, so you saw the picture of the financial house and the window of wealth and all that stuff. So what I learned this concept. First, I learned a concept in 1999 that caused me. I learned it in January of 1999, and by April of 99, I had this breakthrough moment. And I made $6,200 in 1 week. Now you got to understand, the year before, I made $48,000 for the whole year, right? So that's $4,000 a month. And now all of a sudden, I made $6,000 in a week. That was the most money in a week I had ever made in my life by far. And as soon as that happened, I said, "Wow!" And then I said it backwards. I said, "Wow!" And then I said, I can't believe how easy it was." And I said, that must mean that it's easier to make a lot of money in a short period of time than it is to make a little money over a long period of time. And I said, from this day forward, I am going to stop looking at and stop looking for all the hard ways to make a little bit of money. And I'm only going to look for, and I'm only going to look at the easier ways to make a lot. And when I made that decision, everything changed for me. By July of that year, I had my first $8,000 day, just shifting that focus. Right. And so the thing that caused me to have that $6,000 $6,000 week and that $8,000 day. And then from there, it just went crazy. Was I realized that poor people are not poor because they don't have money, but they don't have money because they're poor. And some people say, well, you just said the same thing. No. Poor people are not poor because they don't have money. They don't have money because they're poor. And I realized the reason poor people are poor, middle-class people are middle class, and rich people are rich is because of what they believe the primary purpose of money is totally different. So poor people think the primary purpose of money is to pay bills. So as soon as they get it, they get rid of it. Middle-class people think the primary purpose of money is to establish and maintain good credit, so they can buy things they can't really afford, but they pay them off over time. Rich people believe that the primary purpose of money is to turn it into more money. And so in my book, in the Trash Man to the Cash Man, one of the things I said is, when I get money, I like to hold on to my money long enough for it to get pregnant and have some babies. And I never spend the mama money. I only spend the baby money.
I like that. Yeah. Yep. I love that. So it's a mindset problem.
It's a mindset. It's like wealth and poverty, middle class, all of that. It starts with your mindset, and it starts with your mindset around money and what you believe money, the purpose of money is. And if you don't get that piece right, the rest of it, you're not going to get right.
So take me into the coaching then. Was it kind of at that moment that you thought, wow, if this is then the unlock for me, I got to tell people.
I got to tell everybody. I said, they should have never let me find out about this. I'm going to tell every somebody I can find, you don't have to be broke. And here's how. Right. And here's what's amazing. I started sharing these concepts with people and nobody wanted to listen to me. People who were close to me are like, what does he know? He's been struggling his whole life. And they didn't say that, but that was the attitude. Why? I remember later one of my brothers said to me, dude, I remember when you first got started on this journey, and I used to come to your house and you lived in these old raggedy houses and you always had books on the table about how to be a millionaire and stuff. It's like, and I remember thinking, like, why is he always reading these books about being a millionaire? Why didn't he just go get a job and be like everybody else? Because I didn't want to be like everybody else. Right. And so, but you know what's fascinating is, like, I was probably making $70,000 a month before people in my family, other than my wife and my children, before people in my family knew I had any money. I was making probably $70,000 a month. That was back in probably 2005. And what I did, when people knew I had money, like when people in my family, people around me started saying, okay, what's Myron doing? When they started noticing was when I bought myself a brand new Mercedes for my birthday in 2006. And I bought myself the brand new Mercedes CLS 500 coupe. And I brought it home and boom, I'm driving a brand new Mercedes. And then I bought my wife a new Escalade. And then one day we were just kind of hanging out and we didn't have anything to do. And so we went and test drove a Mercedes on a Saturday. And I took it back to the guy. I said, why don't you let me just keep it till Monday, dude? I'm having so much fun driving. And it was an S550. And so I bought the S550, even though I already still had the CLS. And so they were like, what is he doing that he can afford 3 new high-end luxury cars, right? And then I bought this big, ridiculous mansion. And we used to have parties at our house, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like unbelievable. Like, what are you doing? And then, after my brother, the one who thought I was crazy, he lost his job. He started working for me. Then I taught him how to do some coaching and how to do some speaking. Then he started doing better. When he started doing well, that's when people started listening to me. So fascinating.
Because you had the kind of results, like it's like that gym analogy, it takes 12 weeks for you to see a difference. It takes, couple months, or no, it's like a couple weeks for you to see a difference in your own body, couple months for someone else to start noticing. So you got to be committed to the process.
Absolutely. I was all in. I didn't care if it didn't work. What I was doing already wasn't working. Yeah. So if it doesn't work, what am I going to lose? I'm not going to lose anything. If what I'm doing now doesn't work to change my life, if it doesn't work, I'll be in the same place I am now. Right. And so I haven't lost anything. So there was only upside. When I decided to become like all in entrepreneur, the only possibility was upside. It couldn't get any worse. right? So I had already experienced like what it's like to be married and have a wife that's 8 months pregnant with no electricity and no water. Like I've already, short of my arm falling off in the middle of the presentation, like none of this stuff. You mean I can talk to people and get paid? Oh, sign me up.
I wanted to ask you about your faith then and talk about this whole money mindset thing. Cause I've worked, I have clients currently who, you know, are part of a church organization. I have, I've seen, cause I've been, you know, in my younger years growing up in the church, I think it seems to me like there's a broken mentality with money when
for sure.
And religion, I guess you should give it away to the poor. There's a lot of stuff that happens for free. There's not, using things. It's like, well, we prayed together, like, oh, you're going to charge me. It's going to cost something. And there's this like broken idea with money. Maybe that money is even evil. Maybe that money, you know, is, to enrich yourself, to get all these cars and these different fancy things. And you shouldn't really do that. You should be giving it away to people.
That's interesting.
Speak to that. And I've seen that a lot. I saw a lot of broke Christians, and I'm speaking just from my own personal experience, you know, coming from the, you know, this like Baptist Presbyterian background. Saw so many broke people, and I decided I didn't want that. I liked, you know, the stuff that I saw when I randomly got a chance to watch TV, because I didn't have TV either when I was younger. I saw people who had the flashy cars, who had the lifestyle. They weren't Christians. It seemed like they were focused on making money. And these other people over here, they were focused on, you know, reading their Bible and different things. And so for me, there was this disconnect. And it's only as I got older that I realized that's not right. Do you see that as you are?
I have seen that so much. So the first time I saw a disconnect in churchianity and money, that's what I call it. So
churchianity. I love Christianese is something I've heard before. I love that.
Right. Christianese. That's the language people speak at churchianity. But so I am a believer of the Bible. I believe it literally. I take it literally. I take it seriously. Right. I am a believer in Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. And I am a believer that he is the only salvation. But I do not believe that the Bible is a religious book. I believe the Bible contains religion, but my beliefs about the Bible, and my PhD is in biblical philosophy. So I'm not just some joker off the street making stuff up as I go along. I've been studying the Bible since I was 17 years old, and that was more than 4 years ago. Right. So the first disconnect I saw was right after I came to Christ. I would hear preachers preach messages against making a lot of money, but all the preachers that preached that were making more money than we were.
Yeah.
Like they were living in nicer houses, driving nicer cars. And I'm like, so how rich is rich now? That's like, having money is wrong. So how much money is wrong? Oh, more than you have. That has to be the measurement, because there's not like how much money is too much? How much of a good life is too much of a good life? Right. And so I decided to not get my doctrine from, quote, the church, from
Yep, I'm with you.
The church, but I'm going to get my doctrine from the Bible. Okay.
Imagine that, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. and they are not always the same. And so when I said the Bible's not a book about religion, the word religion comes from the Latin word legere, which means to bind. So religion is bondage. The Bible is not a book about religion. The Bible is a book about a king, a kingdom, a royal family, and the culturalization of a foreign land called Earth. And the purpose of Earth is to expand heaven's culture to this planet. That's the purpose of Earth. That's the purpose of me being on this earth, to expand heaven's culture to Earth. That's my purpose, right? And so when I understand the Bible is not a book about religion, but the book is about a king. Now, what's really interesting, he's a king who wants to make me a king. He's a king who wants to make you a king. So that's pretty cool. A king who wants to make me a king. Maybe that's why he's called the King of Kings. Oh, who knew, right? And but there's also another king. He's a fake king, and he is a king who wants to make you a slave. His name is Satan. He's a king who wants to make you a slave, right? So God is a king who wants to make you a king. He wants to give you an assignment to rule over. And then he wants you to reuse that assignment that you rule over to serve the people you come in contact with. Satan is a king a fake king, but he wants to make you a slave. And then he wants you to attempt to rule over people so you can serve stuff to yourself. That's the difference between God's kingdom and Satan's kingdom. Okay. Now, with regard to money, is money evil? Money is not inherently evil. And some people at this point would say money is not inherently good. No, it's not, nor is it inherently evil. It's neutral. It just makes you more of what you already are. That's a nice little soundbite. It's just not truth. Okay. So here's the truth. Money is neither evil nor neutral. Money is inherently good. Wealth is inherently good. Now, how can I say that? Well, because I use principles of proper biblical interpretation. That's one. And when I say proper, I mean, first of all, I have to use the law of context. What is the law of context? Who's talking? Who are they talking to? When are they talking? What are they talking about? Because it can never say what it's never said. It can never mean what's never meant. Right. So it has to be what it is. It can't be something else. And so that's the law of context, is that my understanding, in order for me to come to a proper interpretation of this passage, it cannot contradict the verses that go before it or the verses that go after it or any other verses in scripture, or I have misinterpreted it. That's the law of context. Right. So I say wealth is good because of that, because of the law of definitions. I have to look up, in order for me to understand any passage, I have to know the definition of every word in the passage, or I can't understand the passage. And I have to understand the definition of the words in their original language, not our modern day watered down language. Okay. Number three is I have to practice the law of first mention, which is this: however God first mentions anything in scripture, that's his original design for that thing. So when I look at the law of first mention, I think about the substance, the physical substance on earth that represents wealth and has since the beginning of time. What is that physical substance on earth that it always has represented wealth? What is that physical substance? It's really shiny.
Gold.
That's right. Well, here's what's really interesting. One day I'm walking through the house, and I believe the Spirit of God prompted me to think, I wonder how many times gold is mentioned in the book of Genesis. I thought it's got to be in there 500 times. So I ran back, got to my concordance, and lo and behold, it's not in there 500 times. How many times would you guess? It's a guess, not a test. How many times would you guess, Jonathan? It's in there.
18 times.
18 times. Okay, that's a really good guess. That's one of the best guesses anybody's ever gotten that I've talked to. So it's in there exactly 8 times.
Okay.
And that's significant. It's significant because every number is important. 1 is the number of unity. 2 is the number of separation. 3 is the number of God. 4 is the number of the earth. 5 is the number of grace. 6 is the number of man. 7 is the number of completion. 8 is the number of abundance, infinity, eternity, and the new beginning. There's 7 days in a week, and then there's a new week beginning, right? There are 7 ages. There are 7 ages, the millennial age being the last age, then eternity begins. So 8 is the number of eternity, infinity, abundance, and the new beginning. In heaven, there's a street that's paved with gold. Why gold? Because gold is a picture on earth of eternity, because it doesn't corrode and it doesn't rust and it's incorruptible, right? And so what's really fascinating is that gold is mentioned in the book of Genesis exactly 8 times. But guess what? The adjective good, to describe what God had made in Genesis chapter 1, he used that adjective 7 times. And God said, and it was so, and God saw that it was good. The 8th time God used the adjective good was in Genesis chapter 2, verse 11 and 12, where it says, and there's gold in that land, and the gold of that land is good. So why do I say wealth is good? Why do I say money is good? Why do I say abundance is good? Because God said it's good. In fact, the first thing he ever said about it was that it's good. That's the first. So that I got to start there, right? So it's good because God says it's good. Now, you ready for your mind to be blown, Jonathan?
Let's do it.
In the book of Genesis, every time gold is mentioned, it is always mentioned in conjunction with God's people, which means that God put wealth on the earth for his people. The first time it's mentioned in the Garden of Eden. How many people are in the Garden of Eden, Jonathan?
2.
What is their relationship to each other?
Husband and wife.
Right. How many stores are in the Garden of Eden?
None.
Stores. Yeah,
0.
Stores, like zero stores. What's for sale? What's to buy? Nothing.
0.
Everything's free.
Yep.
Right. But yet God put gold there. And not only did he put it there, but he told us it was there. And he didn't just tell us it was there. He told us it was there, and he told us it was good. Why would God put gold in the Garden of Eden if there are only 2 people? They're married to each other. There's nothing for sale. There's nothing to buy. There's not one single solitary store. But he puts gold there, and then he tells us why. Because God wants us to know that Opulence and abundance is natural for the environment of children of the king. And the first time gold is mentioned, it's mentioned as providence for God's people. God put the gold there before he put the people there. Guess what? God put your gold here before he put you here too. God put your abundance here before he put you here. He put your wealth here before he put you here. Okay, second time gold is mentioned. Genesis chapter 13, verse number 2. Genesis chapter 13, verse number 2, it says, and Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and gold. That's the first time the word rich was used. The very first time the word rich is used, it's mentioning Abraham, or Abram, as his name was before his name got changed to Abraham. And Abram means high father. So Abram is, he's like this dude who grows up in a family of idolaters, and his family sold idols for a living. That's what they did. God calls him out. Says, okay, if you go where I'm going to show you, I'm going to bless you like you can't bless yourself, make you something you can't make yourself. I'm going to give you something you can't get yourself, and all the families of the earth are going to be blessed to you. He's like, okay, cool. So he leaves, right? The very next chapter tells us Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and gold. And I love the fact that it didn't just tell us that Abram was rich. It told us how rich he was. He was very rich. Right? And it didn't just tell us how rich he was. It told us how he was rich, because God knows everything, and he knew how his people were going to be, because some people were going to say that doesn't mean he had money. That just means he had a godly heritage. No, that's why God told us not just how rich he was, but it told us how he was rich. He was rich in cattle. He was rich in silver. He was rich in gold. Abraham was so rich. Abraham was so rich and so powerful. When 5 kings came against Sodom and Gomorrah and took his son, his nephew, captive, he armed the servants that were born in his house. He went out and fought against 5 kings and brought his nephew back home. You got to be pretty rich if you're going to wage war against 5 nations.
With your servants in your household.
With your servants in your household, exactly. Yep. Okay, so Abraham, that's the second time it's mentioned. So the first time it's mentioned, I'm going to go faster. The first time it's mentioned as providence for God's people. Second time it's mentioned as a possession by God's people. Next time it's mentioned in Genesis chapter 24, and that is it's mentioned as a proof that you're God's people. Eleazar is going to find a wife for Isaac, and he tells Rebekah's family, look, God has blessed my master. He's given him this great wealth, and everything my master has, he's giving it to his son. That's who I'm looking for a wife for. And her family tried to get her to stay. She said, Mama, I got to go. I have a rich husband waiting on me. Right. And then we get down to, it's not the last time, but it's one of the final times gold is mentioned in the book of Genesis, and it's mentioned as a provision for God's people. This is the only time you will see somebody who's not a child of God possessing gold. And it tells us in Genesis 41:42 that Pharaoh took the chain off his neck, put it on Joseph's neck, took the gold ring off his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. So that time it was shown as a provision for God's people. Now, what's really interesting is that is not, it'd be one thing if that were the only place that the scripture tells us that God put wealth on the earth for his people. But did you know there's a verse that actually tells us that God put wealth on the earth for his people? Did you know there's a verse in the Bible that tells us that?
I didn't.
Proverbs 2:26. Here's what it says. But God giveth to the man that is good in his sight wisdom and knowledge and joy. Wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner. Okay, so he's about to say something different, right? Yeah. This is going to be an opposite. But to the sinner he giveth travail. What's travail? Hard labor. To gather and to heap up. Why does he give the sinner travail to gather and to heap up? That he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. So the reason God even gives heathen, sinners, the power to get wealth is so they can stack it up, pack it up, and hand it over.
I know. I was saying that's powerful. And I feel like, so we're going to have to chop this. We're going to chop this up. That's going to be a clip, because I think that piece right there perfectly illustrates kind of this broken mentality.
So have you ever been to Greece? Country?
No, I have not.
Okay. So one of the things that's fascinating about Greece, when you go there, you see that it is a land of idolatry. Like they have idols for everything. They have false gods for everything you can imagine, everything you can imagine, and some things you can't, right? They have the God of prosperity, they got the God of poverty, they got the God of this and the God of that, right? And so what's interesting is when you understand where a lot of this ideology of the church in modern day churchianity comes from. It comes from Greek mythology. It comes from the influence of Rome and Greece on Christianity, because Alexander the Great took over the world, and Hellenized the world. Everybody had to learn Greek, and the Romans came in and they came and took over Christianity, and Constantine took all these religions and tied them together. And one of the biggest reasons that modern day Christianity believes that you should be broke is because of all of the adopted ideologies and practices that came from all of these pagan religions, and they tied it in to their Bible faith. And we've eliminated the Jewish roots, the Hebrew roots of our biblical faith, and we've taken on the Roman roots and gotten rid of the Hebrew roots. And we wonder why people are so confused, because we've got all this error mixed in with truth. And so there's no place in the scripture where it says you should take a vow of poverty. God is a God of abundance. He's not a God of lack. And it's really interesting that I made a statement in this podcast that God put wealth on the earth for his people. But I know the first thought that comes to people's mind, well, if that's the case, why are so many evil people rich, and why are so many of God's people broke? And you know what's really interesting about that? The Bible tells us why. It's not like God left anything out. He put everything in there. The Bible tells us why so many evil people are broke, and so many God's people are broke, and so many evil people are rich. You want me to read it to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So it's fascinating. By the way, I've been going to church my entire life. I have never in my life heard a sermon on what I'm about to read. In fact, I've never even heard a preacher other than myself mention what I'm about to say to you. And I've heard thousands of sermons, thousands. I went to Bible college where we went to chapel every day. Christian school had chapel every day. I have never heard this phrase ever talked about one time in thousands of sermons, ever. Are you ready? Now
I'm ready.
That's a pretty mind-blowing statement, isn't it?
Yep. And I'm right there with you.
So it's in Luke chapter 4. Okay. This is right after Christ is baptized. The devil takes him into the wilderness. I mean, he's led of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. And here's what it says in Luke chapter 4 and verse number 5. It says, "And the devil, taking him up into an high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said unto him, All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them kingdoms, those kingdoms." Here's the part I never heard talked about before. "For that is delivered unto me, and to whomsoever I will, I give it." Satan said, all of the power of kingdoms is delivered unto me, and I give that power to build kingdoms to whoever I want to. Have you ever heard that talked about?
No.
Ever?
Nope.
No, never. Okay. So why are so many evil people rich and so many of God's people are broke? Let me ask you a question. Who do you think Satan is interested in empowering with the power to build kingdoms? His children or God's children?
His children, absolutely.
His children. Okay. So then the question becomes, okay, well, who gave him the power to build? Who gave Satan the power to build kingdoms? Who gave it to him? Is that a good question?
Yeah.
So who gave it to him?
It would have to be God.
Well, that's what I thought too. But guess what? It wasn't God. God did not give Satan the power to build kingdoms. God gave Adam and Eve the power to build kingdoms. In fact, that was the very first thing God ever said to Adam and Eve. And God blessed them. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. Verse 28. "And God blessed them and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have dominion." The word kingdom is a compound word, which means the king's dominion. God gave Adam and Eve the power to build kingdoms in Genesis chapter 1. In Genesis chapter 3, they handed that power over to Satan. Satan has been empowering his children for thousands of years to use the kingdom principles that God established to build Satan's own kingdom. But when Jesus died on the cross, he took back the keys to the kingdom. And here's what's fascinating to me. I'm a follower of Yeshua HaMashiach. I believe Jesus is the Christ. I believe that the gospel is his death, his burial, his resurrection from the dead on the third day. I believe all of that. But I also believe that the Bible that has nothing to do with religion. The first religion was started in Genesis chapter 3 by Satan, and that religion is called humanism. "And ye shall be as gods, knowing or determining for yourself good and evil." Every other religion is a variation of that religion. So my belief in Christ I don't have a religious belief in Christ. I have a governmental belief in Christ. He is the sovereign king. It's a very different conversation. But anyway, so when Christ died on the cross, he took back the keys to the kingdom. I want you to notice that even though Jesus, his death, burial, and resurrection is salvation, he who is salvation, when he came preaching, he did not come preaching the gospel of salvation. Guess what he came preaching? He came preaching the gospel of the kingdom. Because the whole purpose this earth was established in the first place was to expand God's kingdom on the earth. But in order for us to build that kingdom, we have to be renewed. We have to be redeemed back to the king and be restored in right relationship back with the king so we can do the thing he put us on this earth to do in the first place.
So our brokenness, our sin nature is what causes that, combined with this, Hellenistic takeover from Alexander the Great and those influences of the pagan religions that were in place already, has caused this twisted brokenness.
Absolutely. Have you ever read the book Pagan Christianity?
I haven't.
It will blow your mind.
It's going on my book list. I love books.
And if I may recommend 2 more books that will blow your mind and help you understand God's design around the concept of wealth. One is called Business Secrets from the Bible.
Okay.
And the other one is called Thou Shalt Prosper. They're both by the same author, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, Lapin. And so, and I tell you that because so many believers have no idea what they believe. And what's really fascinating is I just want to have my good job and stay with my company and blah, blah, blah. I even had a pastor say to me one time, because I've spoken in churches all over the world, right? I had a pastor say to me one time, Brother Myron, do you mind just like when you preach, don't mention anything about business. We just want our people to be content with their jobs. Like, okay. And I haven't been back there since. Okay. I won't mention it again, but I'm not coming back here anymore. If you feel like you need to tell me what to say, then you don't trust that I hear from the same God you hear from. I'm done.
Yeah.
We're still friends, but I'm done. So what's really interesting about that, though, is that when we look at scripture, the only 2 categories of jobs that we can find in the Bible are slaves and soldiers. Everybody else owned businesses. And I've got a coaching call that I'm supposed to be on 1 minute ago. Let me text Grace and tell her, hold on, that I'm coming right now while we wrap this up.
Yeah, so definitely. And I mean, there are some topics that I would love to hear your perspective on. The slow down to speed up concept. And you talked about working so hard in the beginning, but I think there's this like fake hustle culture that
for sure
that happens. And I think there's a lot of these like, kind of maybe a weird crass term, but like asshole, like people who are always asking for advice and they're constantly in these, motivational environments that they're getting hyped.
Right.
But they don't have the right process. They're not process focused. They're end result focused. And that's constantly, giving them this like cramming for a test.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is that hard work is good because it makes you a better person. But trees and rivers and grass, they don't hustle or grind.
Yeah.
Right. As Jesus himself said, consider the lilies of the field. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed like one of them. And so I believe sometimes, I believe one of the problems with our culture, but even with cultures gone by, is the fact that people will maintain a state of physical diligence so that they can maintain a state of mental laziness. People will work hard with their body so they don't have to think hard with their mind.
Say that again. People will work hard
with their bodies so they don't have to think hard with their minds. Okay.
Okay. Well,
so most people don't have any time to think, right? But if you had time to think and you had time to learn, if you weren't always running, trying to hustle, like I don't hustle or grind. Now I did work hard in the beginning, but working hard makes you a stronger person. I believe in working hard. I just don't believe in working hard for money. I believe there are other reasons to work hard, but I would never suggest to anybody to work hard for money. Anyway, that's obviously another different conversation for a different day.
So I so appreciate you coming on, spending your time in the morning. I love the morning time is when I get going. I get my engines fired up.
That's my groove too. Yeah.
So
Sure.
I love this. Thank you so much. We might have to put together something else because I know there are topics we didn't cover that this is how we met on Clubhouse, right? Me hearing you drop a lot of incredible information. It was in a coaching room actually. And, sure. I would love to kind of talk about some of those topics as well, but this took the most delightful turn, really unpacking this concept. And I really appreciate you sharing, this perspective, but really the brokenness that I think has occurred in the church as a result of kind of some of these twisted, broken.
And it's twisted and broken because it's gotten away from the word. Everything God has ever done, he's done through his word. Everything he will ever do, he will do through his word. And so we've got to get back to the word of God being the focal point, not the church,
not the denomination.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even that concept of the church, that the church is all, that concept is a Roman Catholic concept. That's no, I'm not throwing any dirt on Roman Catholics. I'm just saying it's not a biblical concept.
Yeah.
So
cool. Well, Myron, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time with us here today. Absolutely. And, maybe at some point we'll get you back on the show and get
you want me to share a couple of resources for people?
Please do. And I was going to say at this point, I'd love, where can people connect with you? Because if they're hearing this and they're fired up, you've dropped so many little nuggets, but they're like, I got to go. I got to get more of this. Where can they find you? And what are some resources that they can go and kind of continue this journey that we've started discussing?
So my website is myrongolden.com, myrongolden.com. I'm on Instagram at Myron Golden. You can find me on Clubhouse. I'm Myron Golden on Clubhouse. So, Instagram, if you want to send me a message, you've got a question for me, but I've got a Facebook Bible study group. I don't know if you know this, Jonathan, or not, but I've been doing a Bible study here in Tampa, Florida for the last 8 years. And I've been recording it on Facebook probably for the last 6 years. And so I've got hundreds of videos of me teaching biblical concepts like this. And it's called Bible Success Secrets. It's a Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group. We've got about 4,200 members, but we got room for at least 4,200 more. So come and join us.
Cool. Sounds good. Myron, thank you so much. Jonathan, I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
You too, brother.
Cool.
It's been great talking to you.
We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye for now.